Working in a salon for 16 years, I have seen my fair share of bad haircuts, whether it be from another stylist or at the hands of my own clients. Never my own hands though, right? Of course not. Today, I'm gonna be showing you how I went from that to this. Let's go. So to start off, I'm just gonna cut into this mannequin and really mess her hair up. I'm kind of going also for dramatic effect, just so you can really see the worst case scenario, let's say. This was a mannequin that I did a curtain bang tutorial on that I'll link the video below for you guys to check out, but I'm gonna try to make it really dramatic while also making it some of the things that I have seen in salon in the course of my 16 years of what clients have done to themselves. Okay, so I've got her all chopped up. I've tried to make it a little extreme. I came in here with her bangs, really cutting it off here, and then throughout the back, I have just done some random cutting. So this is gonna be fun to blend in. Obviously, I'm doing this a little bit for dramatic effect, but believe it or not, this is possible to blend in. So what I like to do in salon with a client who comes in with either they've taken a chunk out of their bangs or they tried to layer in the back and they got a hard line, I will always cut at it dry. I don't ever do it wet. When it's dry, you're really able to see how it's laying, where weight is distributed, and I like to go in and cut it dry. And what I will start with is we're gonna start off in the bangs. I will start with just point cutting the hair to soften it up. So you can see here, we've got, it drops down here and this really heavy chunk. And a thing that you wanna really make sure that you make your clients clear on is while you can blend it and make it work, it might not always be exactly what they want, and a lot of times they're still gonna have to let that hair grow. So always make a note with your clients with that. You can only do so much. So I'm just gonna come in and for starters, I'm gonna take this piece here. I can see where it separates and it gets really thick here. I'm just gonna take that piece up and I'm gonna point cut into it with my shears. I like to point cut in with my shears first because this softens it up without taking out too much weight before opting to use a thinning shear. So always start with the texturized, always start with your regular shears and wait to do the texturizing shears after you've softened it up. And then the shears that I'm using today are my shark fin shears. I will link them below along with a promo code that you can use. So I'll work at it before, let me point cut it a little bit softer. And so now what I'm gonna need to do next is I've gotta blend this piece around her face. It's very much drops off from here to here. So we've gotta make that connect. So you're gonna think about how you would do your face framing essentially. So I'm gonna grab her bang here. I can see it's shorter in there, but longer here. So I'm just gonna point cut up into that a little bit more. And the bangs are probably the #1 area and into the face framing that I see the most mess ups from clients. So we're gonna take our piece here and we're just gonna glide our scissors along down like we're doing face framing. Come in at an angle and cut down into it. If you wanna preserve the length at first, pull the scissors towards you and that'll help soften it up. Gonna do that again. Okay, so right here in this section here, we have a little bit of a hole. So this is where you would wanna really communicate with your client that while you can blend it in, they're still gonna have to let some pieces grow. Because this is so short here with this hole, the only other option that you would have to even that out is you could come in and cut her bang shorter, which you certainly could do to get it to blend more, but we're gonna base this off of if the client is like, I don't wanna go any shorter here in her bang area. So make sure you're communicating that with your client. Most times you can get it to blend where they're really the only ones noticing it. So I'm just gonna lightly point cut into her bang a little bit more here. And then I've got this thick piece still right here, so I'm just gonna keep point cutting into it. So you can see we have a little bit of a face frame starting, but I need to cut that up a little bit more. So I'm just gonna come in And I'm gonna pull the hair forward, twisting. I wanna let it drop, and I'm just gonna point cut in right here to this piece. And I'm gonna start working my way back into the rest of this beautifully shattered haircut. So like I said, what I like to do first is I'll grab the piece where they've cut the chunk. So we've got this whole piece right here, very blunt. I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna soften it up first. And just point cut in lightly with my shears. And that is actually already starting to soften that up a little bit more. Okay, so here we have it softened up. So I'm gonna start, because we need to get this piece a little bit more blended in, I'm gonna create a little bit of a layer. I don't wanna bring it all the way up to where these shorter pieces are underneath. I wanna just get it to blend. So I'm gonna do it similar to I would a regular layer. I'm gonna come, pull it out and twist and just cut into that to start breaking it up. And I think I messed it up a little bit in here as well. I gave myself quite the task here with making this look so bad to blend it in. But yeah, that alone already has softened it up a lot. So I'm gonna keep working my way around the head. We've got all of this piece right here. So I'm gonna keep point cutting into it. And I'm actually gonna point cut into all of the rest of these pieces first before adding my layers. The reason for the point cutting is it's gonna soften that blunt line, so it gives you a better idea of how much more hair you need to remove everywhere else to get it to blend in, rather than just coming straight out, finding where it's shorter, and then cutting all this. You're just gonna create more of a problem. So the point cutting is a way to soften it up, and then you get to go from there with creating your layers. I'm gonna do just a little bit more right here. So like I said, somebody in salon wouldn't probably do quite this bad of a job, but I will say I've had several clients bring their daughters in, like little kids, who will take scissors and sometimes just chunk like this. So there might be a time, though it'll be few, that you might actually need to blend in a haircut like this. There might not be that many pieces all over, but I have seen some little girls or boys really destroy their hair with some kitchen scissors. Okay, and now we're gonna come in to our other bang side here. Woo! Look at that. Now this side, I had it a little bit more blended because I did a bang comparison, where the other side was already a little bit more blunty. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna come in and try within reason to match it up to this side, because you gotta think about this is somebody who wants it even on both sides as much as possible. So we're gonna do the same thing. Start with that thick piece, point cut into it. Really soften that up as much as possible. And I need to even out her bang a little here. Okay, and then we're gonna face frame, similar to what we did on our other side. You're gonna take it, pull it towards you, and come in towards you if you want to preserve more length at first to kind of give yourself a little bit of an insurance policy, let's say. Come all the way over and cut up into that. I'm gonna cut right in this corner right here. I'm just taking a little bit at a time. I'm envisioning if this is a client that wants to try to keep as much length as possible given what they have done to their hair. So while you might have someone sit in your chair and you're like, why did you do this to yourself? Try to work your best with them to get it looking as best as you can. Obviously you can only do so much, but try to feel for the client a little bit is what I'm saying. Okay, so now that we have evened out for the most part, I'm gonna come in and layer over here a little bit more. I did layer already on this side some. I'm gonna start adding my layers now in through the rest of the hair to try to blend this in a little bit better. Okay, so now I'm gonna come in, you're gonna pull out your hair for your layer, and you wanna remember, we're not matching it exactly, we're blending it in. This person has greatly messed up their hair, and you're just trying to get it to look a little bit better. You're not trying to fully like make everything perfectly even. You want it to blend. So I'm just gonna come in almost as if I'm doing really, really long layers, as if I'm afraid of removing too much weight. I'm gonna cut a little bit at a time. And then another thing that's important when fixing your client's hair that's been messed up like this is different styling options they can do. It might be better for them to curl their hair more often while it's growing out, or make it look really piecey and textured. They might need to change their color some depending on how their highlights are placed. Those are all things that you can take into consideration when fixing a messed up haircut. Obviously, like I said, this was like for really dramatic effect. But sometimes even the smallest mess up that a client can do on themselves really can be detrimental to them. So while it might not be this dramatic, it might feel that dramatic. I'm gonna come in and take this last piece along her face so I can see where this top part here, that's where it's really messed up. So I'm gonna come in and try to just lightly blend in this middle part to this length here. So we're just gonna cut into that. Okay, so we're gonna check around her face, see what we need to do first, and then we're gonna get out the texturizing shears. I like to do the texturizing shears basically last, just because you're removing the most amount of weight with that, and I don't wanna make sure I'm taking out more weight than needs to be out of how they've already removed the weight, if I'm explaining that right. So I'm gonna look at her face framing along her face, make sure it's lining up. I need to cut that one bang a little shorter over here because, like I said, this was a original comparison bang tutorial I did that it was left a little longer. So I'm just gonna lightly face frame a little bit more over here. I feel like she is a little more straight, and then we will do our thinning shears. So we're breaking out the big boys of the thinning shears. These again are my shark fin shears. They came as a set, and I'm just gonna go in and point cut into it with my thinning shears, similar to how I was with my regular shears. And what this is going to do is it's gonna soften up a little bit more the lines from that point cutting. So we're removing a little bit more bulk, but you have a little bit better it helps soften it up more. You can go in with them first. Depending on how the client's hair naturally is, I like to wait to do it after the fact, just because not every hair type you're gonna have to use the thinning shears on. So that comes down to personal preference and hair type, but I like to wait to do it until I have gone through and done everything else I can first. Now, if your client is open to cutting their hair shorter or something like that, obviously you can do that, but this is more a demonstration for somebody who's like, please help me, I've ruined my hair, I wanna keep my length, what can you do? So like I said, try to be compassionate to people who maybe have done this. I mean, in my adult life, I have not really severely ruined my hair with cutting it, but I definitely, when I was a kid, did. And it was a horrible process growing out my bangs that I cut to like be an inch short. It was terrible. It's my 8th grade year. It was horrible. And they just had to grow. Not really. My mom just didn't know any better to take me to a hair salon. Maybe that's when I decided I wanted to become a hairstylist. So I'm just going through her whole head on the top areas where I had it really chunky, texturizing it with those thinning shears to soften it up a little bit more. I go in at like a point cut, almost the same as my shears. I don't like to come in and just go straight down. I like to go in to keep it soft. And then I'm gonna soften up these bangs a little bit more, just because on both sides we have sort of this little bit of a hole here, as if the client doesn't, based off of if the client doesn't want to remove much more length of their bangs. So I'm just gonna come in and soften that up ever so slightly. And I'm gonna texturize the bangs a little bit everywhere, just so it'll help keep the appearance a little bit softer, especially where there are those little divots with the hole. All right. I like to kind of mess through with my hands, see how it's laying. So when I did that, I feel like this part right here is looking just a little too blunt still. So I'm gonna grab that specific spot and then just go in with my thinning shears. And like I said, it is key. I've repeated myself a million times with this, but it is definitely key to explain to your client that while you can blend it in a lot, you're still not gonna be completely perfect, and there are still gonna be pieces that they're gonna have to let grow. But I think she's blending in pretty well. I'm gonna just lightly reshape her so we can see how it lays. But as you can see, it definitely has more texture than when we started. Obviously, we had to create a lot of texture right here. I feel like this is where like my psychoticness comes in. Just barely. Okay, so I'm just gonna smooth her out a little bit with a brush and blow dryer, and then I will make my final decision on whether or not I need to tweak anything. Okay, so I have just reshaped her with my round brush and blow dryer to see how it's looking before I make my final decision. And what a difference this has made to blend this all in. It's much more smoother. You can't see really too much those chunky pieces. So what you would do at this point is have your client look through the haircut, spin them in your chair, show them it straight and more smoothed out, so that way they possibly might have that option. If you can't get it blended, tell them to curl their hair at that point, or they're gonna have to cut more. But when I look at this, I still see a little bit of pieces in this top area. So I would opt to come back in with my texturizing shears and just slightly soften those up a little bit more. Again, this is like where my neurotic side comes in, that I want to try to make it as perfect as possible, but you have to keep that mindset of you can only do so much to blend it in unless they're willing to cut it like basically into a pixie for how bad I had this done. And that actually helped a lot more. So the last thing I want to point out here is this side I cut into it quite a bit more severe than this side. This is where it's up to your client and it's up to you to explain to them, hey, you had more come off in here. I kind of need to bring this up a little bit more in this area. I feel like I want to remove a little bit of length right here to get it to look a little more symmetrical. That's going to be up to your client to decide whether they want you to perfectly even it out around their face, or if they're okay with it maybe not being quite so even for the first little bit, because like I said, it is gonna grow, but she's matching up pretty well. So basically the piece that's sticking out is this piece that's underneath. It's not really her bang actually, but it was cut from over here. So yeah, like I said, if this were a client in salon, I would tell them to just leave this side alone, let it get some length on it over here as it grows out, to just let them blend and match up, but so much better. And then I mentioned this a little bit before earlier, I believe a lot of times styling the way that you do it can also help hide any mistakes. You can always come in with like a texture paste and really kick it up to give it some movement, and that'll help kind of hide any maybe hard lines that maybe you can't get quite perfect. But yeah, she came out much better. Here we have our finished look, much more blended everywhere. You can't really see the hard lines anymore at all. Remember to explain to your client that you are blending the hair in to make it look better as much as possible. Blending can be so helpful, but a lot of times growing out the hair is still needed. Always start off by point cutting into the mistakes first to soften the hard lines. When adding in layers, remember you are blending, not perfectly matching. This is key to remember unless your client is willing to cut their hair. And I like to use my thinning shears last to really soften any leftover harsh lines. I hope you all enjoyed this week's video. A link to the shears I use will be in the description below, as well as my color and cutting tutorial playlist, so you can check out all my favorite cuts and colors. See you guys next week.